Hello, I'm Rory Smith. This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. And I was very selective when choosing a sponsor because I've always said I would genuinely prefer not to have one than to team up with a product that I don't believe in. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too. Deesha Dyer is a former White House social secretary, serving alongside President Obama and Michelle Obama during their administration. A person in that position has got it all sorted, you might foolishly think, just as I did. But Deesha has written an extraordinary book titled Undiplomatic, in which she shares for the very first time about managing her imposter syndrome whilst in the role. Michelle Obama writes, "From the very first time that I met Deesha, she impressed me with her passion and creativity. Over the years, she worked her way up from being an intern to becoming our social secretary and worked hard to make the White House the people's house." She tells her remarkable story in her book. It's smart, funny, and endlessly inspirational. Well, it's not just a book, because Deesha was very candid, very open, and very honest during our conversation. And I really hope that you'll take away from this that we're all going through something. You might think that other people have it sorted, but the truth is, none of us do. Not one of us. And it's people like Deesha who are really redefining what success means. It's about being authentic, vulnerable, honest, and open as we make a new pathway for those to come, to let them know that you don't have to have it all sorted to achieve greatness or success. In your book, Deesha, you write, "The thing about imposter syndrome is that even when you're managing it well, possibly even fooling yourself into thinking you have overcome it, it creeps right back up when challenging or new situations arise." Were there moments when it creeped up whilst writing this book?
Definitely, there were moments that creeped up of imposter syndrome writing a book because I'd never written a book before. And so I think that what happens with imposter syndrome is even if you learn to manage or overcome it, when you are met with a new challenge, it comes right back because it's your default of saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at it. I need to figure out something else to do. Everyone else is better than me. So when that's your default for so long of how you operate in life, it's what you falter to when you're, not sure or not exactly, knowing how to do something. And that's definitely what happened with the book because I'd never written a book before.
And you wrote it very well, might I add.
Thank you. Thank you.
And when you say there about when it creeps in and you have learned to manage it, and you use the word overcome as well, do you think that you can ever permanently overcome it?
I don't think you can permanently overcome imposter syndrome. I believe that it is something that teeters the line of just learning to do something new, being nervous, going into a new environment, which is, hopefully what we all continue to do as we continue to live, right? So I don't think you can permanently overcome it, but I think you can overcome it from it overtaking your life and being the main present emotion and feeling and action of your life, which that's to me the more important part. So then when it does creep back up, you know how to manage it and to, again, kind of get it away.
It's a term that hasn't been around for too long, but thankfully it's It's becoming more part of our everyday language. And there's many definitions of it online and when you read in other books. In short, what would your definition of it be?
Imposter syndrome for me is the feeling that you are not worthy, you're not deserving, that you got somewhere by luck. It is something that overtakes your entire body, all of your actions, all of your feelings, where you just feel like you're just skirting by until somebody kind of finds out that you're faking it until you make it. And so that is the definition in which I go by. And it's different for everybody as they experience it. And as we learn more about it since kind of its inception, 46 years ago.
Where did it begin for you? Where was the seed planted?
I believe the seed was planted from being a little Black girl in America. I was born 46 years ago at the end of the 70s, and it really wasn't that far off a time where, Black people were not looked at as second class or as lower citizens or anything else, and we didn't have a lot of money. And so I think that, when you're poor and you're Black in America, you automatically don't have a leg up, or you automatically are put in a category of you have to work to not only earn a living, which we all do, but also earn your worth. And so I think that, since I was younger, it was planted in me, but I didn't know it because I was not mature enough, of course, to understand. But then I went to boarding school and it started to come out and rear its head a little bit more, just in how, I was kind of, encouraged to change who I was in order to be someone else, to be accepted. And that's when I first started feeling really consciously that maybe who I was then was not good enough.
Does that begin with thoughts, then turn into feelings, then go through your body? Because you mention you do mention your thoughts, you do mention showing up in your body, and all of this encapsulates. So it's varying different degrees of it and coming from different places, but it has a domino effect.
What I would say is that, for me, I feel like I had the feelings first and then the thoughts came. And I think part of it was because I didn't know how to name them. I didn't know what this was. I felt like I didn't belong, or I felt like I was always wrong, and I didn't understand it. And so I think for me, like, the feelings came first and then the thoughts came. And it not only, when that's a dangerous combination of when your feelings and thoughts kind of get in cahoots and become a team, because then it doesn't affect your whole body. It affects your mind. You're looking for accolades and validation, anything to shut one of them up. And so for me, I believe now, looking back, it was really my feelings. I'm an emotional person. I feel things very easily. And then I thought to myself, well, if I'm constantly having this feeling, then something's going on. And then that's kind of when my thoughts started running away.
So to prove your worth, or to even find your worth, what did you put your energy into as a teenager?
As a teenager, I put it into really a lot of volunteering, a lot of activism, a lot of just advocacy, a lot of raising my voice about things, a lot of rebellion. But back then, those things weren't as noble as we look at them now. Back then it was, you're so loud, you're so bold, you have a bad attitude. And so I really leaned into that. So I put a lot, really into that. But I think also for me, becoming a dissenter and becoming somebody who was a little bit of a troublemaker became like a persona. And so I really leaned into that and was like, well, if that's what I am, then that's what I am, not realizing that, number one, there is a good way to be a troublemaker. And then number two, like, that's an asset. That's something that is, again, now we look at it like, it's a amazing quality of people, especially women, to stand up and be dissenters. But that definitely wasn't the vibe, in the 80s or the 90s.
And this continued, and the book goes into such great detail about this. I mean, you go into amazingly step by step of how you got that first role in the White House, which we could spend the next 2 hours talking about. So we're not going to get into that. And you talk about, the self-doubt that you had and how you eventually got that. And it's an incredible story. But you eventually get the very high position of social secretary for the Obama administration, which is a huge job. And looking at that from the outside, or even from the inside, you would think that once you reach that level, that the imposter syndrome would somehow just magically disappear. But you write in the book, you say, I was chasing the high of achievements to erase the imposter syndrome, not realizing that the lack of self-worth that lies dormant inside so many of us can't be deleted by the momentary high of achieving a goal. Why is that?
Well, I think, we are currently in a culture in which the image and the appearance of success determines how connected you are, determines how well your book will sell, determines how many promotions you'll get if you'll be invited to parties. And so when I came into my own at the White House, I was at the, working for, the highest office in the country, and this, popular president, and everyone loved him. And, I was on a high. And so I think I did not realize that I had full-blown imposter syndrome because I kept achieving these amazing things. And those amazing things are feeding my ego, feeding my pride, feeding my soul. And so, but they're all temporary, And so it was like I got addicted to the validation and addicted to the achievements and addicted to the accolades, because that was a substitution for me really digging up the root of the imposter syndrome and making my foundation one of worth versus, making all these achievements one of worth. And so I think that, it's harder for us to get away from that now, because that's solely how we get, our love. We get our love from knowing that we belong and we want to be in community. But I think it's become a little toxic. And so, I had to really say to myself at some point, Deesha, this is a job. This is going to end. It's not about the job that you have or the achievements or the access. It's about what it took to get this job and what you gained in this job, the characteristics and the foundation that you will take with you beyond this, right? And so I had to start leaning on that, but I was very much in love with the, look at my access, look at who I am, even without me knowing it, but I definitely was. Definitely.
And did it, because I would imagine that in that job role during the day, you don't have time to think about Deesha or any of Deesha's thoughts.
Right.
Did it show up for you outside of work? When you went back to your house apartment at night, did it show up in those moments?
It did. It did, because I would go home and I would be by myself. I would be like, okay, like I have my job during the day, which is great and wonderful. But then I go home and I'm just like watching a regular TV show, eating dinner by myself. And I realized that that's the moments where I had time to sit and think about, what is going on? Like what am I doing? Like, look at my everyday. Like, I don't really have a lot of super close friends or family near me to just be myself with. And so I think when I got home, I was like, I'm by myself. I can hear my thoughts. But then I was like, well, the thing that's most prevalent in my life is this job. And that means that job became my identity. And so that was that for me made it show up even more, because I would feel things so heavy. I get home and I'm like, oh, I made this one mistake. That means I'm not good at my job, right? Versus being like, I made a mistake. I learned from it. That doesn't define who I am, but I took it as, what, I made this mistake. This is my whole identity. That means I'm not good, So it definitely showed up a lot more, when I got home and it was quiet and I was by myself. So yeah.
And it is those little tiny ways that you criticize yourself. It's a negative self-talk the constant berating yourself over something small, that even in your book there was a few stories as well where no one else cared. No one else even noticed apart from Deesha.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that's the thing. That's the funny thing when you say that, because I think about like how, I mean, I still do it sometimes when I think something is so huge, and my husband will say like, "Okay, you can stop apologizing," or "It's not that big of a deal," and I will just ruminate over it, because it's not even the action of whatever happened. It's more of, how will people perceive me? You know, like, will they perceive me as dumb? Will they perceive me as uneducated? Will they perceive me as she doesn't deserve to be here, simply off of this one thing and literally nobody cares. Like, you know, and so, you know, like no one's like sitting around being like, she made this huge mistake, when honestly, I never made huge mistakes enough to be on that level of like the front of the New York Times or something that was going to be, you know. So I think that was part of me unlearning and digging up the root of why I feel like just one thing automatically makes me a bad person or not deserving. And it definitely is really funny, because it does get to a point where it's like, I think everybody else has their own life. So I don't know why I think people are sitting around talking about how horrible I am. You know, so yeah.
I totally get that, and I totally related to it. And I was thinking about past jobs that I had, and there was a few times in the book as well where I said, I do that, because you think you've done something wrong, you go home, you think about it, you think of all of the ways you did it wrong, and then you go in the next day and you try to prove yourself, to prove your worth, to prove that you're worthy to be there. And I didn't even realise that until I read your book. And when I look back and I think, you know, Rory was known for his attention to detail. He was on top of things. He was a perfectionist. And actually, you write in the book and you say, in the role, I learned to cope and manage imposter syndrome by obsessing over details, ruminating over logistics, and making sure every step was accounted for and planned out. So what's the difference in seeing that as someone good at their job and in seeing someone who has imposter syndrome?
Well, the thing is I was good at my job. Like, I mean, I don't know you, but I'm sure you know very well when you had that job, but like, you were good at your job. I appreciate detail. I appreciate every step being taken care of. And that's just what I'm good at. I'm good at organization. I'm also good at processing things. So I know that every detail is taken care of, from like, who's getting the water? What time is the water being poured for the guests? Like, I am very detail oriented, because I don't want to miss a step where, like, you know, if I don't have I think of everything being an event person. Like, if I don't have the water ready, if it's hot outside, what if somebody passes out while the president's speaking? Like, I basically take the scenarios that way. And so I think that that's actually a skill. And I think that that's a skill that not everybody has, because everyone's good at different things. But that's actually a skill that is admirable and wonderful and great. And hopefully, you know, hopefully people that are just like that find professions where that's an asset, right? Like, you know, that's what some people do. But I think that imposter syndrome is, I'm going to do every detail because I'm afraid that if I don't, I'm going to look like an idiot, or people are going to find out that I really didn't deserve this job. Like, people are going to find out that I'm faking it till I make it. So I have to do every detail to make sure that I don't fail, versus I'm doing every detail to make sure that this event's a success, that we are thinking of every step. I'm representing my boss. I'm representing the country. I'm doing what I need to do. So I think it's really the intention of how you look at it. And, you know, and again, like, I looked at it, you know, I think it was a combination of both of those, but it was more on the imposter syndrome side of like, oh my gosh, like, if somebody does pass out, like, it's going to be all my fault. They're going to think I'm dumb. So I really took the scenario to the extreme. So I think that that's kind of the difference.
It's the intention, isn't it? And the why you're doing it. That's what it comes down to.
It really is. It really is.
When you were applying for the social secretary job, you write in the book that you were interviewed by the Michelle Obama. And she said to you that it's a very high role. People will be asking things from you constantly. So you would then have to set a lot of boundaries and learn how to say no with a smile. Up until that point, was that something that was quite difficult for you to do?
Yeah, it was to a point, I think, partially because I wanted people, part of the imposter syndrome is wanting people to like me. And so I think that when you are focused on, or one of your pinnacle, your pillars is, I want people to like me, you don't really set a lot of boundaries because you don't want to put restrictions on their access to you, or, their ask, or, what they want. And it's not all their fault because you're allowing it to happen, right? And they're only going to, do what you allow. And so I think that definitely for me, I was very much like, I'm having boundary, I know I'm going to have boundary issues because I want people to like me, just in case I don't do well at my job. They could be like, well, she's really a great person. Like, she's really a nice person, and she really tried, right? It was kind of like a safety net. But I think the other part of that is I was in this high profile position, and in the high profile position, people want access to the president and first lady. They want access to the White House events. They want to know some gossip. They want to, so it was also like, I had to be careful and put up boundaries because, I had to watch out for who was, really not our friends, or really not my friend, or really didn't have good intentions, but really wanted the access. And I think that Mrs. Obama also recognized that I was in the space, it was all new to me. Like, I moved from Philadelphia to work at the White House. And so I was like ready to be everybody's friend, because I was like, this is great. I'm in a community, and I think she recognized that, like, not everybody's your friend. Like, you have to have some boundaries. And that was so that's unheard of to me. I'm just like, no, like, we're all friends, So I think that that was very helpful for me for that, for sure.
And in doing so, I think the thing that holds some people back from setting those boundaries is the fear of ruffling feathers as well.
Yeah.
How did you learn to get over that fear?
Well, Rory, so I think that it's interesting because when you ask that question, I don't think I've been asked that particular question. I kind of think about how, I was always leaning into this personality of being a little bit of a troublemaker and being a dissenter and being authentic and being truthful. And so to me, I was like, if I don't, get a grip on making sure that I held the line, and I actually, had to, make sure I had to tell people no. And I had to, if I don't do that, like, I'm going to be at risk of messing up my job. I'm going to be at risk of just also selling out my community, or not being what people think I am, because authenticity started to change, so people started to be like, oh, you're a truth telling, you're authentic. That's admirable. So that started to change into like a really great quality when I was at the White House. And so I had young people and people my age kind of being like, we look up to you. Like, thank you for always telling the truth. You always stand up for people. So I was like, I can't let people down. And that's who I am, So I think that I had to just get over the fact that not everybody's going to like me, that I may ruffle some feathers, that like I may not belong to a group, like I may not be invited out for a happy hour, or, you know what I mean? Or like somebody's baby shower. And it was hard and it was lonely, don't get me wrong, but I also feel really great today, present day, of being like, but I stood my ground on what was right. And I stood my ground on looking like, she's has an attitude, or she's offending me. Like, I did not offend you, and I do not have an attitude, but at the same time, like, you're not used to maybe me exuding boundaries, and you're maybe not used to Black women exuding boundaries. And so you got to get over it, And so I think that that's how I leaned into it. I was like, no, I can't be like everybody else. Even if I tried, it's hard for me to go along with a group think. It's like, if it's not right, like it's just hard. It's just hard.
I get that. And it goes back to that judgment from others as well, because it was so interesting in your book when you were writing about, you wanted to be opinionated, but then not too opinionated. That you want it to be loud, but not too loud. That, you know, and there was things in it, and it sort of plays into exactly what you were talking about at the start about being the little black girl, because, you know, you want to be assertive, but then not racially labelled as aggressive, as many black women are. Or you wanted to voice your opinion in a meeting, but then, but be careful because women can be called difficult if they voice their opinion in meetings. And it's such a difficult balance for everyone, but particularly women, and even more particularly for black women. How difficult was it to use your judgment to get over that fear of other people's judgment?
I mean, extremely difficult. I mean, for being honest, Rory, it's still it's an ongoing struggle, really, because, you know, as confident as I am in, you know, who I am and what I say, what I stand for, there are still times when, you know, I think to myself, like, is this going to sacrifice, you know, like my financial future, like with a client, right? Or if I'm too aggressive and the word gets around, you know, are people going to want to hire me for, you know, my work, the work that I do, my business, or have me out for speaking? Like if I come across to this, that to me can also affect my financial future, which I'm 46. And so I'm, you know, like looking to retire in 20 to 25 years. And so, you know, sometimes I have to think like, is this the right time to dissent? Like, is this the right time to like raise my voice about something? And Michelle Obama really helped teach me that sometimes it's best to listen, and sometimes, and not because, you know, you're backing down. It's not a black or white thing. Like, it's not like you're just backing down. Like, sometimes it's just like, you know what? This is not, like, right now, my voice is not going to add anything to this. Like, and the outcome is not going to change if I do add my voice to this. And it's going to cause me mental or physical like ailments, you know what I mean, to like stress about this and to put it out there, then worry nonstop about it. So what is the point of me doing that? Is there a different way that I could possibly, you know, enact change in this particular situation versus, because I'm a talker. Like I'm a very much like a, as soon I'm like, like, so I'm a very much like, I'll voice it, you know, but is there a different way? Like, maybe let me just think on this. Maybe the better way is to let my work, you know, come out and try to influence through my work, you know, versus me saying something right there in a meeting. Maybe the right thing for me to do is to research and to look up stuff, because I'm still growing and I'm still learning. So I think part of, you know, who I am is being like, Deesha, there are times where you also could learn a little bit more. So maybe it's not the time to say something, because you might need to, there's just maybe something you don't know. So maybe somebody has more information than you do, or maybe they're more knowledgeable, more experienced, why they're saying that, versus like, you know, they're just being difficult, or you have to come and oppose. And so I think that's when that's how I try to like gauge the judgment, but it's still really hard. I'll be honest, it's still very hard.
But that's why your book is so brilliant, because it is, you know, it doesn't present you as the finished product. It presents you in your rawness, in your honesty, in your what you deem to be flaws, the imperfections, the vulnerability, all of that. And I think when some people listen to podcasts or read books like yours, it can be taken very literal, as in there is one way to do things. But by you saying all of the things that you just said, you know, about Michelle Obama saying, okay, just, is this the right time for me to speak up? Take a step back, reflect on it, and I guess that, you know, you would use the word gauge there as well. Gauge the situation, because every situation will be different.
Right. Exactly. And I think that, thank you for saying about the book, but I think that that's what the difficulty was in writing the book, because I think that everybody, especially, you know, readers to publishers to editors to everybody, wants a super happy, clean, you know, healed ending. They want the romantic story. They want these things. And I kept kind of pushing back and being like, I don't want to present as if, you know, like I'm still not in a stage of learning. And I hope that I'm always in a stage of learning until I am no longer here, because there are people who are not in that situation. So sometimes when they close a book that has this rosy ending or has this, like, you got it, I did it, you could do it too kind of feeling, they feel worse because they're like, why can't I access what this person has accessed in myself and in the world to be able to have my happy ending, to be able to be so changed like the end of this book was. And sometimes, like for me, I can speak and say, like, I haven't read a lot of books like mine or like self-help. I haven't done that for that simple reason. Like I read one and I was just like, first of all, this person, like, like basically said, I got this amazing job and opportunity. It changed my life and now I'm healed. And I'm like, wait, what? Which means that I have to get this. And even though I had this amazing opportunity, think of an average person who maybe didn't work at the White House or like they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to change the world so then I could change myself. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not realistic, because then we're then always questing for this piece of validation that's going to make us feel worthy, versus being like, wait, no, whether I work, third shift at a fast food restaurant or I work at the White House, I'm worthy. I'm deserving. So I think that I had to be extremely careful, which honestly, like, I bet if I would have wrote a different ending, like to be like, oh my gosh, everything's perfect, I got married, got my favorite job, people would be like, it may have been, like I may have maybe hit a bestseller list. I have no idea. But like, I wasn't willing to go down that route. I just wasn't. I wasn't.
And I'm glad you didn't. My favorite thing about reflecting back at the moment is, in all of the times and all of the decisions I've ever had to make, the ones that I'm happy with are the ones that I look back and go, I did the right thing.
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that, and that feeling of like, I did the right thing, even though like at the time you're not quite sure. And at the time, that, and I tried to say this the other day on Instagram. It's like, for me, I have to trust that I am in the right place at the right time, doing what I think is best at the time. Like, I can't look in hindsight and be like, oh, well, I should have done XYZ. Well, I didn't know how to do XYZ. I didn't have the money for XYZ. I didn't have whatever. So I did the best I could with ABC, So I think that when you get to that point, which again, I'm still like questing every day to make sure I stay there. When you get to that point, like there's this whole room of like less worry and less anxiety that you're able to access, because you're just like, I did the best that I could at the time. Like, like people are like, Deesha, you should have marketed your book this way. I'm like, with what money? Like, I didn't know, you know what I mean? Like, I did the best I could, you know what I mean? Like, had I had more money, I could have blown, $50,000 on somebody who's like a top pro in book ads and book marketing. But then what? I'm trying, I'm going towards retirement. I'd rather save some of that and get a really great publicist, really amazing publicist but then maybe not get. So I just have to think that we have to watch ourselves sometimes when we say stuff and do stuff like that.
Yeah. When on reflection on those things, when you were leaving the White House after the Obama term, and Barack said to you, which you wrote about in the book, and you said that he took you aside and he said the words to you, I hope you know you did a good job. What did those words mean to you? This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too. And Barack said to you, which you wrote about in the book, and you said that he took you aside and he said the words to you, I hope you know you did a good job. What did those words mean to you?
It meant a lot. I think because in those simple words, I think that, obviously the president and first lady are very busy and they're not thinking about me all the time. But I think that there is a vibe you get working next to someone where you can kind of understand their personality or understand like what they're going through or what they feel. And I think that they knew that I was like struggling with confidence, and they knew that I was always just like, is this good enough? Is this good? It did this, I was there for years, and it was like, did I prove myself? And it was like, you've been here for 5 years. Like nobody, you know what I mean? Like, or you've been here for 6 years. And so I think that when he said that, it meant a lot to me because it made me feel like he was not just saying that, to be nice, but he was also giving me a command, kind of like, I hope in a way of like, no, you need to know and you need to digest that you did a wonderful job. And I think, at the time, even I was like, I mean, we're done. So of course he's going to say something like this, but then over time I started to be like, no, he really did mean it. And even if I see him today, it's a different, I feel very confident in knowing that I served both of those two people very well and served the country very well, even during my shortcomings, which we all have. So I'm not ashamed of them, but I think that it meant a lot because I think, again, it was more of a command of being like, I want you to know that because you're going now out into the world. And so like, you are no longer under us. You are no longer in this job that so well. And so, you do so well. Now you've got to take that and go out into the world, which again needs this like foundation of confidence. So I want you to know you did a good job and take that with you. And so, yeah.
And in that, so in taking it with you, because he was talking about the past tense of a job that you did for those 5-6 years. Mm-hmm. Did him saying those words instill in you to give you the confidence even now to say those words to yourself and not wait for a president to say them to you?
100%. I mean, I tell people, when I do my speaking, especially when I speak to young people, because they like love President Obama, I always say like, I want you to understand that like, for me, those words came from the president of the United States, Barack Obama, which obviously is like super dope and amazing and wonderful and like a name drop, right? But we all don't have, President Obama, in our lives, but we do have somebody and, who's telling us, whether it's through words or through action, that we are worthy and that we are worth it and that we do a good job. And so it isn't about, the person who said it as much as it is about what the person said and how I digested that in myself. And so I think that for me, the words, mean a lot, but they mean a lot, not only because who said them. I would say that's the least part of it. Mm-hmm. They mean a lot because they're true, and they're true because it's a reflection of who I am, the work I've put into it, the things I'm good at. Again, despite my shortcomings, the things I'm good at. And so I tried to instill that because people are just like, well, of course, if I had President Obama tell me I did a good job, like I would whatever. And I'm like, yes, but you don't. Like, so it's not President Obama's not telling you that, but who is telling you that? And when whoever that person is, like, you've got to absorb that, like, let's stop rejecting these compliments and absorb that and be like, no, I really am good at this. Like, and it's hard for us to do and say that because, I was raised like, to be humble and don't be conceited and don't be a snob. But it's like, no, I have like, whether it's like, OCD or not, I have like grade A organization when it comes to stuff because I'm like, that's just how I roll. And that's a quality again, so yeah.
Exactly. It was, being Irish is a sort of generalization, but we tend to be quite humble. We're brought up to be humble. And I related to that when your grandfather said, he said, God doesn't reward braggers and boasters. And I went,
yes.
Yep, welcome to Ireland.
And I think that there's like some truth to it, but then the other part is just like, with all the other societal things like happen to us and that we're in, like, we go to the other end of the spectrum of being like, it's like, look, I cured a disease, and it's just like, but I can't talk about it. I don't want no credit. And it's just like, no, that's super dope. Look at what you did, right? Like on any level, like we do for kids, when kids do something, they use the potty or whatever. we like have a party. We're like, oh my God, you used to play. It's just like, at what point do we stop like clapping and cheering for each other when we do good things? You know, it's just like, let's get back to that. Like, we need it.
Yeah. And actually, that was my favorite quote in the whole book. We have to show others how to treat us, and we do so by first treating ourselves with the same dignity, compassion, respect, and affirmation that we used to seek from others.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And it's funny when you read it back. 'Cause I think to myself, before I wrote this book, Rory, if I would have read that somewhere, I'd have been like, what kind of crap? Like what do you want me to do with that? Like, you know, like, what do you want me to do with that? But now that I've lived through it, like, I didn't write anything that I had not lived and pushed through, right? And I do believe it, because when we are in relationship and in community with people, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, like we all have done it. Like, we just have to be super careful, because we are giving them permission to treat us a certain way if we don't have a boundary of how we treat ourselves and what we will allow. And so I think that once I started kind of standing up a little bit more for myself and putting that boundary in, there was a lot of loss, in the sense of like people being like, oh, we can't take advantage of her, or, oh, she's too much for us, or she's not involved in our group. But I felt so good about myself, you know what I mean? And also I weeded away people and things that just did not serve me at the time, even if they were close, right? And I think that that's just like what I want walking into, like, the second half of my life.
And when we started this conversation, we talked about the seed being planted, but the little black girl who didn't fit in, who grew up trying to fit into every single situation to try to change herself. Who is Deesha now?
Oh, not an author, which is great. But I think that, who I am is an evolution. It's an evolution that is never going to be completed of, and a woman who, is curious, and who loves, and who is giving, and just the same black girl that I was, 40 years ago, 46 years ago. I'm exactly the same girl, in the sense of just like, I look the same. I sound the same. Everyone's like, you always look the same. You always sound the same. And I do, because that's just who I am. But I'm constantly also in evolution, and it feels really great, because I now understand a bit more the assignment that I have been given, to be able to speak truth, and to be authentic, and to give, and to be silent when it's necessary, and to when to pull back. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate myself more than I ever did before, because I'm no longer this faulted, broken person who's just like, anything I say is odd or weird, or nobody likes me. I'm just like, that's okay. Like, and it doesn't make anybody else bad. It just means that, like, we're not meant to be in community, right? And then that's okay.
This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. And I was very selective when choosing a sponsor, because I've always said I would genuinely prefer not to have one than to team up with a product that I don't believe in. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too.